Ready? I'll go ahead and call us to order and declare that we have a quorum of 5 members present. That takes us to item C1, debrief TASA TASB convention and additional board training opportunities. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. Harris, members of the board. At the regular meeting tonight, President Harris will have the opportunity to read into the minutes the fact that all board members have exceeded their training requirements for this 2019 year. And it's a good opportunity for us to pause and talk about some training opportunities that we've had over the last month. The TASA TSB annual convention was held in Dallas last month, and we had a number of board members go to that. So I'd like to see if any board members want to comment about the training they received. Some of us had new board member training. And then some other members of the board had some other opportunities to take board training within the last month. So we've added this to the agenda and just would love to have a conversation and hear what people were able to learn and the opportunities that we had over the last month and over the last year.
Great, thank you. Anyone want to comment on some of the things they saw or heard at the convention or otherwise?
Or otherwise.
Well, I'm the or otherwise. So.
I'm happy to chime in. It was great to collaborate with, well, I was in the new board member training for
A long time.
7 hours. And it was great to collaborate with other school boards and just getting to know what they're doing, their challenges, what they're facing with the House Bill 3 was, a big topic. And just, it was really good. It was well handled. I thought the way they facilitated the convention was really good. And then I got to sit in on listening to Midway School District talk about ways that they have rolled out or built some strategic initiatives that they took. Like, it was just very interesting. So they're based on their education foundation and how they rolled that out, they used the same consulting firm to build their strategic initiative with their board members and their superintendent. And I think what they were expecting and what came about were different things, but very, very positive, that led to focus groups with the community and a lot of buy-in from people that they normally don't hear from. So they were very detailed in their presentation and really gave the members a lot of things to take away. So I thought those really stood out to me.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yes. I went to quite a few that I really enjoyed. I'm actually going to kind of look through my notes. One of them was Women in Leadership, and that one was really cool, and I got to meet a lot of other women school board members. Yeah, can you not hear me? And so that one was really neat. But then my favorite one that I went to that was not community-based accountability. I'll talk about that one real quick. The community-based accountability was a lot of fun. I loved the session that we had. I guess it wasn't a session that was open to everyone. That was just schools that are part of TPAC or districts that are part of the TPAC. That one was nice to get to collaborate with other districts and to hear where they are and their thoughts, and then come up with some different ideas on how to improve on that process. So that one was really neat. And then the second community-based accountability system session that I went to, that one was awesome because there were so many people in that room that didn't know anything about it. So they came based on the little write-up that was in the brochure and came to listen. And I had a table full of people that were excited about it and had a lot of questions. And I've even had one woman contact me since then just to ask a couple of questions here and there. So that one was really neat, and I love seeing all the excitement about the community-based accountability, about a different type of accountability system. But outside of that, my other favorite one was a student ambassador program that is done by HEB ISD. I can't ever remember exactly what HEB is. Does anyone else know?
That would be Hearst Euless Bedford.
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
The fighting Trojans and Raiders.
So that reminded me, or it made me think of we almost have this here in our district, because it was almost like taking Leadership CSISD and our LEADS program that's at our middle schools right now and kind of marrying those, because what they're doing in HEB ISD is they're taking these students, they're juniors and seniors, and they have to apply for this program, and they're taking them through an in-depth informational about the school district. Basically, it was almost exactly like what we're doing with Leadership CSISD with our community members and parents. They're doing that with students. And then these students then go out into the public and they have a volunteer piece, and they're the ones that lead people around on tours and the schools. And so they're able to answer questions.
So the second part's like the LEADS program that we have.
Second part is exactly like the LEADS program that we already have established in our district. So I thought that was neat just because we've almost got that. I don't know how LEADS what they're wanting to do eventually, but I think it'd be something if they wanted to go beyond what they're doing or look at what another district is doing, this would be a great district to contact. So that's it for me.
Mr. President, since she talked about community-based accountability, kind of jump in and kind of just remind everybody what we're talking about there.
Absolutely.
So this year, working with the Texas Public Accountability Consortium, we are dividing our work up into work groups, and we have a 5-district group that includes Georgetown ISD, us, Burke-Burnett, Royce City, and Sunnyvale. And one of the things that we identified in our work together is the need to bring our boards together just to kind of calibrate ourselves and have really foster, as Mrs. Nolan said, a discussion among the board members. And so that's what we were able to do since all the boards were going to Dallas. That's a pretty geographically diverse cross-section of the state right there. All of us were going to be in Dallas for the TASB convention, so we were able to get an hour on Friday morning in a room to get together and talk through that. So it was great for those board members who were able to be there and be involved in those discussions. I think we all found it enlightening. We wish we had a little bit more time, but perhaps it'll be something that we can do in the future as we look at ways to train ourselves and take the work deeper.
I wanted to hit that as well. So I was able to be at that session, and I agree. We could have used some more time. But I thought it was great. It was really nice to sit at least we didn't have tables, but in the same geographical location with people from other like-minded districts and glean from them what they're doing as far as community-based accountability systems. And it was I thought you guys did a great job. Kudos to you, Dr. Ely, who was one of the presenters. I also went to it was a presentation by some leaders from Prosper, and I understand we're not Prosper. We're never going to be Prosper, but we have done our own growing, and it was interesting to see. I mean, the explosive growth that they've seen in probably the last 7-8 years.
Mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling, but to hear their leaders talk about how they have handled it, and specifically, I was really interested in how they hired their staff and they retain their staff, just in this time where there is such a shortage, which is another one I did go through, a shortage of teachers, but it was really interesting to see how their leadership went about hiring and retaining, and I think a lot of it sounded familiar because of some things that we've done around here in the last year or two, as far as the teacher profiles that we've put together. They've done some things very similar, but there was some really good information as far as recruitment of quality teachers, and it was interesting. It was interesting.
Thanks. Well, I'll share something I watched. I'm the or otherwise, since I did not attend the TASB convention. It was a Region 6 training, and it was I would say a very good ground level piece on the relationship of the board and the superintendent and how that team of 8 should work. And as you form the new board, the three of you who are going, well, four if we count you, assuming you'll be here, that
I don't know how'd that training go.
What did he say?
I mean, it really hit home for me how important it will be for you all to go through that training, particularly for the three new members, and to help them understand the role that they're to play in the district. And as importantly as that is the role they're not to play. I know when I came on, I had a lot of, I'll say, misconceptions about what the board is and what it does. And it's important. It's things that 9.5 years into this, I think I understand a little bit now, but 9 years ago I didn't. And helping those board members by taking advantage of some of that training that you all could do as a group, something I highly recommend and encourage you all to do, because there is good stuff out there, and I think it can help you all get on the same page, particularly early on when hopefully there's not something too tough to tackle, because that's important to do, because you will have something difficult at some point, and having good, strong relationships will really help not only you and the board and the team of 8, but also the district as a whole end up in a better spot. And that training reminded me of that. So that's what I'll share.
Just one quick word on that, because I did the same training.
So that one. It was good.
Yeah, it was good. I remember thinking how much better it would be if I had more people with me to discuss what was going on. And, doing it kind of Lone Ranger, I thought this is okay, but it would be nice if we were all doing it.
Right.
Do you mean watching that video together and doing it, or doing?
Yeah, I mean, everybody in my, in my living room watching the video. No, I mean,
Oh, you're
wherever.
doing a training
You mean
that was
live?
similar to that?
I'm sorry?
You mean live?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, and not even live, even watching the video together, but to be able to turn it off and, yeah.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, you obviously would have a lot of good live opportunities or discussion-based events you could go to. But yeah, I mean, I thought that video in and of itself would not have been a bad option for the board to get together in this room and put it up on the screen and watch and discuss, because it was well done, I thought.
That was good.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, item C2, consideration and discussion related to measures of academic progress, MAP implementation. Dr. Ely.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. We have been embarking on a journey this year to implement the MAP assessment. We talked a lot about that during the spring as we went through the budgeting process, and we were searching for a number of things. One, we needed to find a way to see how well our kids were doing and how well we're doing as a system in implementing our updated curriculum. We need to be able to understand how our kids are growing throughout the school year. And we also wanted to make sure that we had a way to see how we're doing more as a system, perhaps to play into as a way to give some evidence to some of the factors and key questions in our community-based accountability system, and do it in a way that wasn't relying on the state mandated assessment. So for a number of reasons, we've been looking at the MAP assessment for the last several years, and we were able to implement it this year. I've asked Mrs. Perry to come and do a presentation on this because it represents an investment on behalf of this school district and this board, and it's something that's obviously going on in K through 8 throughout the school district. So she's going to talk a little bit about how we've implemented and the testing windows, and give you a taste of some of the reports that we're able to get. And so I'm really excited to be able to talk about how MAP is going in College Station ISD. So with that, Mrs. Perry.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Ely. So this evening, as Dr. Ely said, we're going to really just talk about that implementation process. As we gain more data, we look forward to sharing district-specific information with you over time. So we have lots of reasons that we are excited about the implementation of MAP, and As was mentioned, this really is something that we've been looking at for a number of years, and we felt like the time was really right for that in terms of where we are in our journey. If you'll recall, back in July, we looked at that histogram and really kind of explored where we were and where we're going as a district, and we're really, really thrilled to have this measure to better look at how our students are growing and mastering skills and really making sure that we're considering the needs of all students, because as we'll talk about this evening, we've got a range of needs, from those students who really struggle to those who need to be pushed to the next level. And so this is really a great way to target at instruction and make great informed decisions. And we are also excited about that side effect of having good information for our community-based accountability system. So MAP is a standardized assessment, and sometimes those words can cause a little bit of a shiver because standardized testing can definitely get a bad rap. But I think it is important for us to acknowledge that MAP is produced by the Northwest Evaluation Association, or NWEA, which is a nonprofit company. And these assessments are normed on over 10 million students across the United States. And so there is a very high level of validity and reliability associated with the assessments. And so we do feel like they're going to give us really high quality information. From a teacher perspective, really knowing where your kids are and being able to prepare both for whole and small group instruction is a great benefit of this assessment. It really can engage parents and students more in that goal setting process of looking at, where am I and what am I ready to learn and how am I going to get there? And overall, looking at that progress monitoring piece is something that we found to be a challenge, and we think this will really help us with. From campus administrators, district administrator perspective, we really are excited about having something that's so comprehensive, not only in contents, but being able to look across the district in different student groups, at different subsections, different grade levels, and knowing how we are doing at meeting our students' needs, and then seeing how are they doing over time. Are we seeing the kind of growth that we would expect? We can also look at performance and what's predicted, not only on STAR, but on measures like SAT and ACT. And ultimately, for those students who do struggle, this can help us design intervention programs that are really targeted to skill gaps.
You want us to wait for questions, or can we ask them as we go?
Well, I might be answering them along the way, but feel free.
Okay. I'm just going to, I'll try, and if you're coming, I'm sorry, but
Sure.
I'll forget it otherwise. The predictive element.
We will get to that.
Okay, go ahead.
I will. Yes. So MAP Suite has several components, and we're going to break that down with the two that we've adopted. And so we'll start with MAP Growth, and then later we'll talk a little bit about MAP Fluency. So MAP Growth is really the heart of this program, and this is where we administer the assessment 3 times a year, beginning of year, middle of year, end of year. We do have some flexibility locally at what that assessment window looks like, but we need to set it so that once we participate, we can close the window and then compare ourselves normatively to students that took it during that same time frame. Because if our middle of the year window is in January, but others do that in early December, then we wouldn't normatively necessarily want to compare ourselves to that group of students because it's not during the same time frame of the school year. So for students in grades K through 8, all students are participating with the exception of very small numbers of students who are significantly impaired in both reading and math. Then in grades 3 through 8, students are also participating in science. At the high school level, we actually didn't plan on year 1 implementing MAP there, but our campus administrators got really excited about what they saw. And so for selected students, especially those who may be struggling, we've started to implement some MAP testing, and they found it very useful to help with things like EOC prep. So the MAP assessments for growth also have a Spanish component for both reading and math. So that's also been very helpful so that we can really look at students' performance in both language when they're being instructed in both English and Spanish. looking at MAP growth, really this assessment is about readiness. It provides us with what's called a RIT score, and that stands for Roush Unit of Measure, but really it's about what you're ready to learn. It identifies the next skill in the progression, but also where any gaps might be, and it looks at how students are growing because it is administered 3 times a year. Even at the end of our first year of administration, we'll be able to see really, really good information. And as we administer over a number of years, you'll be able to look back and see how students have grown over time from their first administrations onward. So that's also very helpful. So, from a teacher perspective, this is not new information, but I think it is a good visual. It's just an example of what a random, anonymous 4th grade class might look like. We've got that Roush unit or that RIT score on the left, and then we've got individual students across the bottom. So you can see overall, these students are ranging from 3rd grade to 6th grade, but they're all in that same 4th grade class, and they've got all different instructional and learning needs. So from a teacher perspective, if I only instruct at that middle level or exactly where my grade level TEKs are, and I don't scaffold that up and down on student needs, then I'm really missing some gaps on both sides. And so this really helps us to identify where those students are and very early in the school year. I know our intermediate and our middle folks, especially when those teachers only have students for one period out of the whole school day, have found it very helpful to have such a quick identification of where their students are ready to learn and where their learning needs are. So we're going to walk through several different visuals of what we see on the back end when we're looking at the resources and the kinds of reports that are in MAP. So I want to caution us. First of all, this is not real student information, so we are not disclosing anything that we shouldn't be. And it's really easy to get down into the weeds and want to really talk about all the little minutia. But this evening, I'd really like to just kind of give you guys an overview. And of course, if you have questions, we can look at those as well. So one of the powerful components of the system is what's called the learning continuum. And you can see here we're looking at math, number and operations in base 10, and the assessment is aligned to the TEKs. So it works well in Texas too, and it helps us to really drill down and know if I have students whose RIT scores range. I have the Vanna. Yeah. So I have RIT scores across the top in these various ranges, then I can see what are the kinds of components that those students are ready to learn. At the individual student level, I can actually drill down and know where my kids have performed in terms of strength and need, and I can identify the kinds of things that might need to be whole group instruction because it's spanning across multiple RIT ranges, or the things that maybe need to be small group because it's a fewer number of students that need those skills, and I can really plan and target more effectively. Thanks. All right. So this is a visual representing the process of taking the MAP assessment from that student perspective. So if we start on the left and the student gets the first question right, it's going to progressively become more difficult. But if that student gets the next answer wrong, then it will come back down and really try to identify exactly where the student is in their instructional need. It's very nuanced, very different than any other assessments out there because the experience that every student has is going to depend on how they're doing along the way because it truly does adapt up and down across the administration. So that means also that for students who are more advanced, the administration is going to take longer because they're going to get questions right, and it's going to take a little while to get to a point where we know what they're ready to learn because it is more advanced. Most students, after the first administration on the growth component, will take about 45 minutes, and of course that's going to vary. So that's definitely been a learning curve, but we do think it's a good investment in time to plan for instruction. So when we talk about normed, this is just an example of what exactly that means. And we have these charts for the different components of assessment. This is the reading normative data. And so as I mentioned, This is normed on over 10 million students across the U.S. And so every few years they'll update the norms and there may be some adjustments. But overall, in order to really know and provide context for what those numbers mean, you have to know what's the content area, what's the grade level, and then is it beginning, or middle or end of year. So for reading assessments, we'll then know what a typical performance is or middle of average, right? So that mean would tell us that 13.5 points below and above 141 is average for a kindergarten student at the beginning of the year on reading. So there's definitely more interpretation and understanding of context for these scores, but when our teachers receive them, they're receiving training on this information, and then the parent reports also do have the context of percentile ranks to help put that in perspective in terms of how my student's doing relative to others. So let's look a little bit about the kinds of reports that are available. If I'm a teacher, I'm probably going to start with a report called the class report that gives me an overall summary of the students in my particular class. So in this case, we're looking at reading performance for one particular teacher's classroom. She had 11 students take the test, and we know that the mean RIT for her whole class was a 201. So if that's a 5th grade classroom, assuming that it was the beginning of the year, 205 would be what the national mean is. And so that teacher could quickly interpret, oh gosh, overall, my class is a little bit below the middle of average, but still within the average range relative to the normative sample overall. Then we can also break that information down into performance levels within reading. So we've got down on the bottom left, literature, informational text, and then vocabulary acquisition and use. So those are more of those big buckets of the components of reading that the MAP assessment breaks it down into. And then with the color coding, I can quickly see the areas that are blue and green are strengths, the areas of red are weaknesses. So obviously this teacher would know right away vocabulary is an area that we're going to need to focus on more with this particular group. We can then drill down at that individual student level, and I can know exactly how my students did. So I can see their specific RIT score, the one in the middle, because we've got the standard deviation above and below. And in this instance, they're ranked from low to high. Then I can also see the context of percentile rank. For that student. I can see their Lexile range, which would be another way to measure reading, and how long that student took to take the assessment, along with that breakdown of literature, informational text, and vocabulary. Looking at my class in another way, I can run a report that's going to break that down by RIT scores within those 3 areas of literature, informational text, and vocabulary acquisition. So then I can very quickly see how my students group in terms of their scores in those different areas. And I can also see if I've got students who are high across the board and need to be really challenged, and then also those students who may need intervention. I can also determine who might most appropriately be grouped for those different areas. And as a teacher, this is a dynamic report, so I can actually click on those hyperlinks and go straight to that particular student's report. This is just another way to look at how my students are doing, but it is in the context of how I predict that they're going to do on the spring administration of STAR.
This is what you were asking about, I believe, Mr. Harris.
Yes. So you can, in the MAP assessment, they've done a significant linking study to performance on STAR. You can actually get a very highly correlated prediction of how students will perform. Not just will they pass or not, but will they fall in the approaches, meets, or master's category in the different subject areas. Not only do the folks at MAP tell us that this is very accurate, but our friends in other districts who have been administering MAP for the last few years say that it is incredibly reliable to see how students actually perform. Now, we have not historically placed a heavy emphasis on STAR assessments. However, we are seeing in the new accountability system the influence of growth on overall performance. And so campuses really do have a stronger interest in seeing how students are growing relative to the prior year. And so this is a helpful lens for us as we monitor our student progress. You can actually do projected proficiency on SAT and ACT as well, and that's printed out on those parent reports, so they also receive that information. So this is a very dynamic report. This is not necessarily the kind that we would print out because you can really drill down, and I can pull up an individual student. So if I had clicked one of those hyperlinks, if I were actually on the website earlier, it would take me here to the student profile report. So I'm going to just acclimate you a little bit because this is a lot of information. So right across the top, you can see the content areas and then the overall RIT score. So math 200, reading 209, language 221, and science 206. So right now we're looking at reading because you can see that it's highlighted. I can then go down and I can see, okay, 209, how did that fall? Well, it was in the 42nd percentile, meaning that this student did better than every 42 out of 100 students that was in the norming group. But then because the student has taken it over time, you can see their progress over time, I also can get a percentile rank on how they're doing with growth. Are they growing at a rate that is expected or higher than their peers? Lots of other good information in terms of Lexile levels, and then again, those instructional levels that really break down the various components of reading. Not only do I get a RIT score, but if I click on those, I can get to very specific student skills in terms of what they're ready to learn. And I can even go in and create a growth goal for this student and work with that student specifically to talk about, okay, by the next administration, we're going to set a goal for you to achieve X score based on what's predicted by MAP. So this is a new report called the Family Report, although they're all new to us. It was just designed and released by NWEA, and it really is designed to be a high-level overview of student performance. And this is the report that we've talked with our campuses about sending home and sitting down and talking to families about. Of course, that last one would be a great source of information for a teacher to review in a conference, but this is really, truly a nice overview of what MAP is, what the report is about, and then not only how did they do on the most recent administration, but you can see we've got some charts with the growth over time for that student, along with their current performance and percentile ranks. And so this is something that you can print out and send home. In fact, I've talked to a few families that have already received them, so it's a great resource. Additionally, we did send a communication home via our campus newsletters that was consistent across the district about MAP to our families, because this is a very different type of system. It provided some information on when we were going to be completing the assessment, what it was for, and gave a little more information about where you can go to learn, because there is an online parent toolkit that's got videos and lots of additional information to help folks understand what the purpose of this assessment is and how to interpret the results. So let's also talk just a few minutes about reading fluency. We've talked a lot about growth. Reading fluency is a component of the program that we've also adopted and are implementing with all students in grades K through 2. However, it's available for any other student, which is phenomenal because we have lots of students who are struggling readers beyond second grade. This is something that even our intermediate folks have used to help identify their intervention needs and found it to be very quick and accurate in assessing students' reading levels. And it is also adaptive. So This is an example of how that process might work. A student begins on the left here with a picture book warm-up. They're wearing a headset with a microphone, which is similar to how we assess our Spanish speakers using the TELPAS assessment. And they read into the microphone, and then the computer processes their oral language and determines, have they spoken the words on the page? And if not, then we need to back up and move into listening comprehension and basic decoding, foundational reading skills. If they are able to read those sentences, then it would move into passage reading. The awesome thing about this part of the assessment is that while it does seem to be kind of disconnected where a student is reading into a microphone, all of it's recorded so the teacher can go back and listen and compare the scoring and really hear for themselves how they did on that assessment, and even play that for the parent if there are questions about how the student did on that assessment. So we're finding from the feedback we're receiving that this is really surprisingly accurate. I think folks were a little skeptical because it's new and it's different, and it seems like Mr. Nugent's got this look.
That's so cool.
It is really neat.
It is replacing reading individually with every student in the room, but we can, as Mrs. Perry said, go back, and if the teacher does have some concerns, can go back and listen to that herself if she needed to.
Right. So for the purposes of assessment, we're not spending so much time doing one-on reading assessments. However, this is freeing up a lot of time to do small group instruction where teachers can really hear students read, but not necessarily for this kind of assessment, but for instructional purpose and immediate feedback. So we're really excited about that piece.
So is there one per class, or is there multiple? Can you have 2-3 students in one particular classroom doing it, or is it one by one?
You can have a whole class at the same time if you were to want to do this. In fact, our K2 students, we found it really successful for them to use iPads. And so they would plug the headphones into the iPads, go sit on the floor in the hall, and it was like a game. They had fun. So.
And it does okay with accents? Okay.
Now, the teacher can go back and override the scoring. Say, for example, a student has a severe articulation disorder. The computer may not be able to pick up on that speech impairment and what the student's saying, but the teacher may be a familiar listener, so they could go override and score it themselves. So we completed our first testing window on October 1st and have been doing a lot of reflecting in preparation for the next window that will begin in January. And we had an opportunity to talk with our success team folks last week. And so I want to share some grows and some glows with you all as we move forward. So we know we can always improve. And while overall the first administration went very smoothly, we had a lot of really great things to talk about, and I'll share some of those. We know that this is something we're going to have to continue to educate families on because RIT scores and standardized tests are new to us, and so we want to make sure that our families understand the results and what they mean. We want to also make sure that we've got equitable access to technology across campuses. We did have to extend the window a little bit this first round and have found some gaps that we are working on addressing right now. As well as developing a more long-term plan for where we're going with overall technology and devices in our schools. But we need to also provide some more clarification on accommodations because it's a little different in a standardized environment than day-to-day in the classroom. Continue to provide good training and make sure we have a plan for makeup testing and what we're going to do for the one area, science, where Spanish is not available. Really, overall, this was a great experience. We've been getting phenomenal feedback. We had excellent trainers come in and train our groups from each campus. We did a trainer of trainer model. One person told us the data is unbelievable and we are already using it to plan. And Dr. Trammell and I actually have meetings set up with every campus that's administering to review their data and make sure that we're all on the same page with how we're going to use this information to drive instructional decision making. And really the feedback that we also keep receiving is just struggling students, whether they're in intervention or they're students with disabilities served under 504 special education. This provides really great information to help support those needs as well. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions or consider any comments that you may have.
Thank you very much. Was it CBMs that we had?
Curriculum-based measures, yes, sir.
That was a long time ago. We've come a long way since then. Those tests, I remember my kids taking maybe kindergarten, first grade. It's pretty impressive technology. Questions, comments?
I have a question. So this, I just want to clarify, this was rolled out at all campuses, K through 8?
Yes.
Okay. And then you said selected students in high school?
Yes, initially that was not part of our rollout, but
Right.
there was so much interest that we've started there as well.
So
Okay.
some algebra students and English 1 is really what we're looking at, some selected ninth grade students.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, it's to, sorry,
Oh.
the predictive question. Let me just jump in
Go
right
ahead.
around. As to the SAT, ACT, have they found that to be pretty accurate as a tool for that as well?
Yes, I'd be happy to share the linking study with you if you're interested in learning more.
No, that's okay. I mean, wanted to see how accurate it actually was.
Yeah.
When is that test administered, the one for MAP that we're using as a predictive tool?
So every time that it's administered, it also provides the predictive results. So
Okay.
each time during the norming window, so 3 times a year.
Okay.
So I think I'm the only one in here that has seen this, right? I'm the only one with elementary kids, elementary and middle school. So I've gotten the chance to see these. We had our parent-teacher conference for my little one, and we got to go through this. And she did a great job talking us through it and explaining it. And she too, said there's so much more information, there's so much more data. And she found it to be very helpful. But then also, this is, my nerdy little kids in my car. My little carpool of kiddos, after they took the first round of the MAP test, they were talking about it on the way to soccer practice. And they were talking about how they liked it. They actually, they liked that it was on the computer, and they could tell that the questions were getting harder and then easier and then harder and then easier. And one of the kiddos even said something about how, even though it was easier, she liked that she was able to get something right, and then it got harder. And so it kind of gave her a little boost of confidence in the middle of the test. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing for a kid to notice and to say. So the kids liked it. The kids in my carpool, at least.
Anything else? Great. Thank you very much for that. That is exciting, and I'm glad that we're involved in it.
Thank you, Mrs. Perry. As Dr. Trammell makes her way up here, Mr. Harris, I'd like to just visit about our agenda right now. As it stands, it is 6:15. We need to be done by about 6:30, 6:35, because we have a public hearing coming at 6:45. We need to move these out. Of the 2 remaining items we have left, Item 3, C3, about K through 3 reading academies is not time sensitive right now. We can talk about that if we wish, or we could come back later. Would like to at least have a conversation for the next little bit about Item 4, though, because that's something that is going to be probably several months in the making of discussion, but I'd like to be able to lay that out. So having laid that before you, Mr. President, how would you like to proceed?
Go ahead.
So you want to go ahead and move to item
C4, we'll come back to 3 if we have time.
Okay, thank you. So item C4, consideration discussion related to opening participation for non-resident students for certain career tech programs only at College View High School. So what does all that mean? So first of all, I'd like to just talk about some of the things that are happening in this community. When I'm talking about Bryan College Station in regards to workforce readiness. Has been a big push in this community for partnerships with businesses, working with Blinn College, with other different entities around. Bryan ISD, as I think most people around the table are aware, have opened this year their Career and Technical Center out on Mumford Road, which they they purchased the property, and they've worked with a number of different partnerships to put programs in there for manufacturing and other different things that aren't offered in school districts around this region, College Station included. They are now working. They have students coming in from Snook ISD and from Caldwell ISD this year, and will be expanding that opportunity to other students throughout the region coming up next year. And I've been talking with Dr. Whitbeck. Mrs. Ferguson has been talking with her counterpart over in Bryan ISD, and we expect to have this opportunity for College Station ISD students to be able to participate. Now, the way they're able to participate in Bryan is through a memorandum of understanding, where they would go to school most of the day here, and they would travel over. We would be responsible for transportation to take our students over to the CTE Center in Bryan and provide that transportation back. So I applaud Bryan ISD and their vision for what they are doing to help workforce development in this greater community. With that as a backdrop, we as an administration have been thinking about, what are some of the things that we can do as well to help the greater community in workforce development in some programs that are not offered in other school districts. So the first one we have is we're as you are aware, in the second year of our Fire Science Academy and our partnership with TEACS. We've got a group of sophomores, and we have a group of freshmen who are in that second cohort, group of sophomores who are in the first cohort. It's a 4-year program where students are able to, by the time they get through our 4 years and turn 18, are able to go straight into the academy to become firefighters. This has the potential for someone going through all 4 years and going directly into that job, saving them about $20,000 of costs to get into that a fire program and go through the academy and be able to be hired as a firefighter somewhere in the region or throughout the state. This is a great opportunity for our students, and we are excited to have it in College Station ISD. It's not being offered anywhere else. We do have a few students who are taking advantage of that. The administration's been thinking, what if we did something similar to what Bryan has done and offered that as an opportunity for students in other school districts to be a part of that program as well. There's a couple of different ways that we could do that. Number one is we could do it through kind of the same model that Bryan is doing with a memorandum of understanding, where students would stay enrolled in their home district. They would come over to College View to be a part of the Fire Science Academy for a certain part of the day, period or two or half day, and then would be able to go back to their particular districts and for the balance of their school day. That is one option to do. The other option is to contemplate having limited open enrollment for non-resident students, meaning students who live in other school districts, to come and actually attend school all day long at College View, to be involved in this fire science program, or potentially another program which I'll visit about in a minute. As you are aware, the only way that students who live outside of College Station ISD, who are non-residents of the school district, can attend school in College Station ISD is if they are the children, their parent guardian is a full-time employee, meaning 30 hours a week or more of College Station ISD. Those folks are allowed to bring their kids with them if they so choose to College Station ISD schools. If we were to go through the process of considering that, it would entail a change to board policy. So that would be obviously a couple months of conversation before we would be ever able to make a decision on that. So all we're here today, this evening, to do is to kind of lay out some of the options and tell y'all a little bit about what we're thinking and get some feedback. As far as limited open enrollment goes versus MOU, the way College View, as y'all are familiar, is organized is that it is on more of a college type schedule. We have A days and B days. Students go to school Monday and Wednesday for certain classes. They just go to school Tuesday and Thursday for their other classes. And Friday is a shortened class period where they go to every class period for a short amount of time all day during Friday. So as we're thinking about students traveling in from, say, Bryan, Caldwell, Navasota, Iola, wherever, if fire science were to be a Monday, Wednesday class, an A-day class, they could come in and go out on Mondays and Wednesdays, but what would those students do in Tuesdays and Thursdays? So we're trying to figure out what that might look like if we want to go with an MOU type of an arrangement. If it were a situation where we would go to limited open enrollment, then it wouldn't be a problem because they would go to school full-time in College Station ISD. I guess for those in the audience and those who might be coming back to listen to this recording afterwards, I think it's important for everybody to know that students in College View only attend College View. They don't go back to a campus of residence at Consol or College Station High School to take part in other classes or to be involved in any other extracurricular activities. So kids at College View aren't playing football or marching in the band or doing anything like that. If you make the decision to go to College View, you're 100% enrolled in that school and a member of that school campus. That's why it's a choice. That's why we put some different programming over there to provide our high school students with some choice. So the goal of this is not to grab as many students from outlying areas to the districts to come to our schools to take advantage of the average daily attendance. These would be very small numbers and that are even available in the slots in the program. What we're wanting to have a conversation about with the board is this an opportunity for College Station ISD to provide a service not only for CSISD students, but for these particular programs for others in the community who might find a great benefit in being involved in a Fire Science Academy or this other one that we're kicking the tires on. So I guess I'd like to talk about that one a little bit. Mr. Grimes and I are scheduled to meet with Blinn College, who's wanting to put together a program that would lead to an Associates of Applied Science degree and a certification in facilities maintenance. Basically, it is a program that would give students, upon completion, skills in 4 major trades: HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, also in carpentry, also a little bit in electrical, and a little bit in plumbing. So these wouldn't be somebody who would come out and be a licensed plumber or a licensed electrician, but it'd be people who could be readily employed in places like College Station ISD or hospitals around to work in facilities maintenance, which is a need as well. We're in conversations about that with Blinn, and that could potentially lead into articulation agreements with some of the system universities at RELIS as well. So this would be something that we would want to consider potentially as a way to have either an MOU or limited open enrollment for this program if we were to try to go this route. It would not be for kids to come in from outside the district to be involved in our academic dual credit or any other programs or choir program over there or anything like that, or art program. It would be for fire science and potentially facilities maintenance program if we were able to get that off the ground. So I've talked now for quite a while, but I wanted to give everybody kind of the backdrop as to what it is we're looking at and some of the parameters that we have to deal with, and just open it up for comments or questions and from the group. So, Mr. Harris.
Okay, thank you. Let me clarify a couple of things first, just for my own mind. So the way it would work, a preference would be given if a CSISD resident student wanted to participate in the program, they would be able to participate, assuming we have enough spots. And then once those students have made that choice, then if we have remaining spots, that's what we're talking about, making available to the broader community.
Yeah, we would not want to displace any College Station ISD resident students who would be interested in those programs, correct?
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
What is the capacity of the fire science program now, and how many students do we have?
Excellent question. So the capacity has been increased as we continue to evolve in working with TEKS in this program. Now we have a capacity of up to 18 kids per cohort.
Okay.
And we are not anywhere close than that right now.
Okay.
We have, I believe, 3 in cohort 2 and 3 in cohort 1.
Okay.
We had a couple more who are no longer in that program, but as you can see, we have some capacity, but we don't have unlimited capacity. We've got some seats.
Okay. And as you've been discussing this within the administration, is there a preference on the MOU versus the limited open enrollment? I mean, I'm just thinking about that College of U has built such an identity, and so it makes me feel like the limited open enrollment almost sounds like maybe the more preferred way, but I'm curious.
So I'm going to back up, and I appreciate you asking that question. We've talked about it as administration. I picked up the phone and called a number of local superintendents to kind of let them know that we're going to be talking about this at the board meeting and get kind of their opinions on this or any feedback or questions that they had. They understand that we're just starting a community discussion about that. And so I've largely found the superintendent leadership and our nearby communities very supportive of this idea. While if it were to be limited open enrollment, they realize that they would lose some funding if students went with that. But they understand for the most part that would be small numbers. And it's the greater good of having opportunities for students that they are not able to offer in their school district. So I did have one superintendent that has been working with Brian and said Brian has been able to be very specific and work with them and offer an additional course while their kids travel over from outside the county. They come over, they take their manufacturing course, and they're able to offer another academic course. And that superintendent would love for us to be able to find a way to make it a half day.
Okay.
And so we don't know if we can do that or not, but we're looking at all sorts of options available to us now. So to ask if we have a preference right now, we don't.
Okay.
We're trying to see what we can do to meet a need that we think in workforce development in the community, at least for a couple programs.
Thank you.
Sure.
With the way the fire sciences is set up right now, whether it's Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, what's not the commitment, but what's that look like on that day? Is it it almost sounded like it was an all-day deal. I mean, is it half day, 2 hours,
No.
1 hour, 1 hour and a half?
No, there are classes, but there are times when they will be able to go to TEACS to experience that facility for their training. So, and in fact, Mr. Grimes has been in discussion with Mr. Cheshire about kids even being able to enter at their junior year and kind of compressing it. They're looking at that now to make it a 2-year program. So it's an awesome opportunity for a student to graduate with a career. There's a camp, a short camp after they turn 18 and graduate that they would have to go through, but then they could be hired actually in any state in the United States as a firefighter.
So, yeah, they're basically classes there. If you would think of them as labs every once in a while where they go to Brayton. If we were able to move forward, and I don't know if we will with this facility maintenance, that's a little bit more, has more moving parts in the sense we don't have HVAC and electrical and plumbing at College View. There would be some time that they would be on the Rellis campus for the lab portion of what they would do. And so we're, as again, still exploring that. Don't know if we're going to be able to do that one or not.
I think on the smaller programs like that, I think it's a good way to reach out to the other school districts. The one thing I guess my concern is the scheduling. To me, doesn't make sense unless you do the limited thing, because you look at other school districts, and that's just my opinion. I think it would be disastrous or almost impossible sometimes for the scheduling of the different school districts. So I'd be all in favor for the limited enrollment option.
Thank you.
Other comments? As a general rule, I'd say it sounds like a great idea. It reminds me of the kind of the discussions when College Station High School was opened and we were talking about CATE programs, and it didn't make sense to have a full slate of the exact same programs at both schools.
For some of the really expensive ones, yes.
Right. So what we needed to do was we could offer more and different programs by saying, okay, this school will have these, this school will have these, and then there's some commonality, of course, but it's the same thing. It's just across districts so that our entire community benefits. I really like that aspect of it. But I'll tell you, I really do applaud how sensitive you're being to the potential disruption that, well, even this discussion could have throughout our community. And I'm glad we're sensitive to that, because the intent is not to, in some material way, cannibalize other districts. And I've heard that loud and clear from you tonight. So thank you for being sensitive to that and involving other superintendents. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are contemplating no action. This is all we want to do is just put this out for conversation, and we've got some more some more talking to and planning to do, and anticipate bringing this back to the November meeting, continuing it through to discussion on this to see if this is a way we want to go forward and how we might want to go forward here in the future.
Great.
I would just ask if there are any questions that you think of before we come back in November. If you could let Dr. Ely know, we'll be happy to come prepared to answer them.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So with
We need
the
to-
hour getting into 6:30, we can just skip altogether item C3.
Why don't we bring it back next month?
And I'm seeing a willingness to bring it back in November and not stay after the meeting and reconvene.
I would be in favor of that. How about you, Mr. Williams?
All right, we can come talk about it in November.
I'm happy to do either.
Okay. Well, then with that, we are adjourned.